Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a complex and intense scenario, the first month of the 2026 U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. We're going to look at just how a regional conflict could explode onto the world stage.
All right, so how could something like this even happen? Well, we'll start with the spark that ignited the whole thing. Then we'll walk through the three major fronts. That's the military, the economic, and, of course, the human cost, before we get to the biggest question of all. How does it end?
So it all begins right here. On February 28, 2026, a massive coordinated military strike plunges the entire region headfirst into war.
And this was the official justification. The U.S. and Israel launched a joint mission, they codenamed it Epic Fury, and they framed it not as an act of aggression, but as a totally necessary strike to get rid of what they called an existential threat. And the response? It was almost instantaneous. Within hours of those initial strikes that killed Iran's supreme leader, Tehran just unleashed this huge retaliatory barrage. And by the very next day, the conflict had spilled over into the global economy.
Okay, so let's shift gears and look at the military front. In just 1 month, the scale of firepower deployed by both sides was, well, it was simply staggering.
The air campaign was just immense. U.S. Central Command reported hitting over 10,000 targets. The whole goal here was to basically dismantle decades of Iranian military and industrial development in just a matter of weeks.
And you can see one of the main objectives right here. According to U.S. intelligence, roughly 2/3 of Iran's entire missile arsenal was either destroyed or buried so deep that it became useless.
So how did Iran respond? Well, their counter-strategy was pretty clear. Don't contain the conflict, widen it. By escalating both horizontally, that is, attacking 14 different countries, and vertically, by hitting civilian and infrastructure targets, Tehran is trying to make the cost of this war absolutely unbearable for its enemies.
And the sheer volume of these attacks has been relentless. The UAE, for example, has been targeted more than any other country. They've had to intercept over 2,100 drone and missile strikes alone.
And this really gets to the core of Iran's strategy. It's all about the math. They use these waves of cheap drones, some costing as little as $20,000, to force the U.S. and its allies to fire multi-million-dollar interceptors. You see, this is economic warfare, disguised as a missile fight. A military fight of this scale immediately ignited a global economic crisis, and it was focused squarely on one of the most important shipping lanes on the entire planet.
We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. When Iran moved to shut it down, it was like clamping a vital artery of the global energy supply. Commercial tanker traffic, it just dropped to nearly zero, almost overnight.
And Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, they enforced this blockade not with warnings, but with direct attacks. In just the first 2 weeks, more than 20 commercial ships were targeted. And these attacks were lethal. Crews were killed, ships were set on fire, some even sank. It sent a very clear message to the world. This waterway is now a war zone. Now, let's talk about the money. The direct financial burden for the United States has been, well, astronomical. In the first week alone, the cost of munitions was estimated at $1.3 million per minute, and the Pentagon has now asked for another $200 billion just to keep operations going.
So, as you can imagine, this created a massive ripple effect across the entire globe. The blockade, the attacks on energy facilities, it sent a shockwave through the system. Oil and gas prices soared, and financial markets everywhere were rattled.
Okay, so we've talked about the strategic chess moves, we've talked about the economic fallout, but beyond all of that, the first month of this conflict has exacted a heavy and just tragic human price. So here's the thing. Trying to get accurate casualty figures from inside Iran is nearly impossible. You've got the fog of war combined with state control of information, which means we're left with a series of conflicting and, frankly, incomplete reports.
The numbers really tell a confusing story. Officially, Iran's health ministry reported just over 2,000 deaths. But independent human rights organizations who are tracking the conflict, they put the number thousands higher.
For the U.S. and Israeli forces, official numbers confirm 15 American and 5 Israeli military personnel were killed. And on the civilian side, Israeli authorities have reported 24 deaths from those relentless missile and drone attacks.
And all of this brings us to the final and most critical question. After a month of such intense fighting, how does a war like this actually end? Well, diplomacy is happening, behind the scenes. But the two sides, they remain worlds apart. The U.S. is focused on dismantling Iran's weapons programs, but Iran rejected that proposal as one-sided. Tehran's counteroffer? It includes demands for war reparations, which is, of course, a total non-starter for Washington.
Publicly, though, the U.S. administration is projecting total confidence. The message is that this maximum pressure from the military campaign is forcing Iran toward the negotiating table, even as the fighting continues.
And that leaves us right here. After one devastating first month, diplomatic channels are open, but the bombs and the blockades continue. The whole world is watching, waiting to see if this escalatory cycle can finally be broken, or if this is just the first chapter of a much, much longer war.